We have a fantastic panel of folks who are going to talk to us about how utilities, electricity, gas, how the whole market looks around how we are thinking about data centers. Are data centers allowing us to go through an energy transition? Are they helping? Are they keeping us behind? Are they accelerating us forward? So we're all just going to find out. So I'm not going to read anybody's bio because they'll just introduce themselves. And we'll start with Dan. Dan,
okay.
Where do you play within the space of, oh my goodness, data centers and electricity?
All right, so Dan Hopper, Managing Director of Regulatory Policy at Southern California Edison. And basically within my scope, we have energy markets and procurement and resource planning, as well as demand growth, data centers and electrification growth, and figuring out sort of how to deploy infrastructure wisely in order to serve that load growth.
Awesome. And then
I'm Haresh Kamath. I'm with EPRI, the Electric Power Research Institute. We're a nonprofit research organization doing public interest research in energy and the environment. We have an initiative called DC Flex, which is looking at how to make data centers an integral part of the flexibility of the grid in addition to being able to serve their loads. So we'll be talking a little bit about that and some of the other work that we're doing to try to make sure that load growth is maintained in this era of energy transition.
awesome. And Armando?
Great, thank you. Armando Infanzon, with SoCalGas, I'm the Director of Clean Energy Business Development. So SoCalGas is the largest natural gas distribution company in the country. We serve over 21 million people in extended service territory, approximately 24,000 square miles, which cover about half of California. We have been operating for 150 years. We have a very extensive experience of permitting and building energy infrastructure in California. And I will be covering today the role of microgrids to support new electric load and also enhance reliability and resiliency, some of the two concepts that data centers require.
Absolutely. So, everybody on this panel has sworn to keep their responses very snappy. So we're going to get through a whole lot of content, and I swear to leave time for audience questions. So be thinking about it. And Dan, when we were prepping this, you said you could set the table for us. So talk to us about what is the relative size of this issue? What's been going on? How does this impact SE's planning?
So it's not really news anymore, right? It's like we hear it all over the place. Demand is exploding. It's electrification load. Now it's data center load. A lot of it in the East Coast, PJMs, big numbers. Question is how much of it is real? Where is it going to be? Where is it going to show up? In California, it's mostly concentrated in Northern California. So we just saw some forecasts from the CEC, California Energy Commission, that said it could be up to 5x by 2030 just in the greater Bay Area, right? So very significant increase, which for us, more in the longer term, like decade or so. For us, though, what we're dealing with is electrification load. So fleet electrification, vehicle electrification, and it's causing us to think about how to do planning differently, what are the implications on greenhouse gas emissions, and what sort of policies we need to put in place to make sure we have the grid ready for those large loads that are going to hit the system.
And what percentage, before I move on, of the load in California or nationally are expecting to come from data centers 5-10 years from now? Who wants to?
Total. There are numbers all over the place, depending on what you believe,
They are all
right?
over the place. I cheated.
So yeah, I mean, so I've heard numbers as high as 15%. Although I think that's dubious, given what we're really looking at. Probably more in the range of somewhere around 5%.
So 5% of future load, data centers only. Okay.
I think that number, though, masks the issue that it's heavily concentrated in certain areas. So it could be kind of an average increase over the country, but if you have large load increases in specific places, that's where we start getting into this situation where we have long lead infrastructure projects with data center loads that needed in the next 1 to 3 years.
Absolutely. And before we go to Armando sort of solution space, what is everybody seeing about this? What is the research showing us about? Yes. What is the research showing us about sort of this trend? How are you planning for it? How should we all be thinking about it?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, let's talk about the bigger question of electrification in general and electric load generally growing. This is the story of the day for electric utilities, and as Dan said, it's not necessarily a news story, but it's a little bit new in the context of, we've gone for 30 or 40 years without significant load growth and kind of flat declining load in the U.S., and all of a sudden we're talking about 5% growth a year. So that requires a real change in mindset among utilities, among regulators, among a lot of different players out there, including ratepayers and legislators, everybody in the ecosystem, investors, they need to think about this. Now, in the middle of this in data centers, of the kinds of loads that we look at, data centers are actually pretty attractive, right? You're looking at something that's a very steady load, and so they're paying into the rate. If you have if the data center actually materializes, if it's actually in place, then it's going to be paying for its load, and so it's a great kind of customer to have. That's just the kind of customer you have. But the real question is, from a planning standpoint, is that load going to actually materialize? A lot of people are saying, yes, I'm absolutely going to build that data center there, and then we hear back from them, oh, wait a minute, hang on, maybe that'll shift. So, that is kind of the conundrum at the moment.
And how long will it persist?
Yes,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
that's right.
Absolutely. Armando, I know you have some slides you want to share with us. So we'll talk about problems, we'll talk about solutions. Do you want to talk to us about
Sure,
microgrids?
we can cover. So I'll be talking about microgrids. Microgrids is another alternative to the electric grid in terms of bringing electric resources, right? Normally, there are four components of microgrids. It's the energy generation, energy storage, energy management, and load management, right? So energy generation, you can have on-site production of electricity using solar, fuel cells, linear generators. On the energy storage side, batteries is the most common technology. Energy management, these systems are operated by microgrid controller. It's like the brain who orchestrate all the energy resources and the uses of energy needs. And load management, right? So microgrids can be shaped to data centers that require a lot of load, base load, but also can cover intermittent or peaking load, right? So microgrids can be located behind the meter, either grid connected or off grid, and they can be operated in multiple ways, either parallel to the grid, island mode during an event on outage or system constraints, but also completely off grid, right? So today in the United States, there are about 1,100 microgrid facilities with a total installed capacity of 5.3 gigawatts. In California, we have about 170 microgrid facilities with a total installed capacity of about 581 megawatts. At the national level, natural gas technologies is the leading technology. In California, solar and storage plus fuel cells are the leading technology. About half of the microgrids in California have solar and storage. In the account, about 1/3 of the capacity. In fuel cells, there's about 10% of the capacity. This is driven by the state's policies and programs established in the country. In the past few years in California, there has been an average about 20 to 30 megawatts of new microgrid capacity installed. In 2023, there was a large Department of Defense facility, but this is an additional capacity. There's only 2 data centers in California that have fuel cells today, and only 1 EV charging facility. So this is a new technology with a lot of potential of market penetration. In terms of customers, the leading customer that deploying microgrid technology today is college and universities. They have about 25% of the capacity, followed by military bases and also hospitals. Commercial customers is the 4th largest category. These first 3 account about more than 60% of the capacity in California. We at SoCalGas, we developed and opened our first microgrid. We call it Hydrogen Innovation Experience. We opened operations in 2023. This is in a first of its kind hydrogen fuel microgrid that has on-site gas and electric generation, and we have a solar capacity, battery system, and a fuel cell that can provide that base load and peaking needs. We received several awards, but we were proud to be selected as a world-changing idea by Fast Company. And microgrids, as I mentioned, is a great solution to many different customers. Customers that require quality in the electricity, like data centers. It can also support EV charging, some of the critical facilities, and another important use case in California is water treatment facilities that they can resolve their flare gas with on-site solutions. And that's what I have. So in summary, microgrids provide a lot of benefits to customers like data centers, aligns with California policy by providing a near-term solution to energize new electric load, by enhancing reliability and resiliency. It could support also with price certainty and avoid or delay some of the system upgrades, and also support some of the customer sustainability goals by depending on the fuel of choice by customers. So that's kind of another solution, but that data centers can benefit from.
Totally. And I want to go to Dan next about sort of the world with transitional solutions, and then where you see the final state. But before I do that, okay, so Armando, again, we are not filming me. Thank you. Sorry. So Microsoft, and this is public, wants to be carbon negative by 2030. So are you saying that the solution here is microgrid fueled by green hydrogen is sort of where SoCalGas would see a solution to that need, both in terms of needing power, needing reliable power, but needing carbon-free power? Did I get that right, or what am I missing?
Yeah, so that's for that specific microgrids, right? At the end of the day, it's a customer choice and based on their sustainability goals, right? Today we have natural gas that is cleaner than some of the backup solutions that the state has been seeing in terms of backup diesel, for example, right? But also these facilities or technologies can transition to cleaner fuels like hydrogen without very small retrofit, right? They can run today on natural gas, renew natural gas, and as they continue working on the sustainability goals, they can transition to hydrogen without significant retrofit on the generation technology, but obviously is in need of the supply of clean renewable hydrogen. Sometimes can be like we choose to do it on site for this demonstration, but that will be based on different customer
So it'll be
choices.
very geographically
Yeah.
constrained. And Dan, so we have one very exciting solution, which is, depending on where you are, green hydrogen is solving a carbon-free energy problem with the reliability. Where is SCE sort of seeing the transition state, and where is SCE seeing the end state?
Yeah, so a couple things. I think right now we're very focused on a couple different areas. So it's what we call internally proactive planning. So how do we make the grid ready and available to install capacity when large loads need it? And so that looks like partnering with new and potential and new customers, and like if it's a fleet owner, for example, what is their 10-year plan around electrifying their fleet? Are there places on the grid that have existing capacity that they can interconnect to? Do they have flexibility for depots? And then, are they installing distributed energy resources on their facilities that can help sort of mitigate some of the load growth? So there's proactive planning with customer outreach. There's leveraging data analytics around, DER and electrification trends in specific locational areas on our system. And when all of that's supposed to, again, close this gap between, hey, we need to interconnect in 3 years, like megawatts of load, when it sometimes takes a decade. If they need if a bus depot needs to install electrification system, we might need a new substation in that area. And so how do you close that gap? Some of that's proactive planning. The other part of it is around bridging capacity. If we need to install capacity or load now, we have a portfolio of solutions that we're rolling out around load management, around mobile energy storage, or kind of storage that can be picked up and sited at either the customer's facility or a substation. And those sorts of solutions can help, again, are like temporary until we can go and install kind of a longer term kind of infrastructure in the system. And so that's what and all utilities are going to need to sort of work through those sorts of those portfolio of measures. And we're not even yet talking about the resource needs that are needed to make sure we're hitting the GHG targets. And we can talk about that in a minute. But in terms of just grid management, a lot of utilities are scrambling around the same questions, including the questions around who pays. How much do we have loads, data centers put skin in the game and put some upfront payment around the interconnections that they're going to need. So it's a pretty innovative time, both on the planning front and on the regulatory sort of cost recovery front as well.
Well, awesome. And
Yeah.
Haresh, take us to the bird's eye view. So we've talked about sort of the current, the next 5 years, and then the long state. What are you guys seeing?
So, ultimately, we think in the long run that DC centers and data centers and all large loads can actually play a role in stabilizing the grid. Actually, maybe even provide flexibility to the grid to a certain degree. So we have a project right now called DC Flex. We're working with a number of different players, utilities, some of the very large data center operators. Google is involved, and Meta is involved, NVIDIA is involved, Microsoft, I'm sorry, are not involved.
I've only worked there for 6 months, so I don't know.
I guess he's involved. We're actually trying to come together and try to find 3 different ways in which we can do this. One is working with the data center itself, seeing how the needs of the data center can be accommodated in a more flexible way, either by on-site generation, combination of on-site generation and load management, or maybe even load management of the community around the data center. There are lots of ways in which we can look at that. But we're also looking at how, what role these large loads, data centers are kind of the first large load that we're looking at, but there are other large loads too. This is also true for a box store or a large industrial facility, for example. How they fit into the planning processes for the grid around a community or in an area, right? How that works with the power flows over time. Especially, as Dan pointed out earlier, in the utility industry, we're looking for the very long term. We're not looking at a 5-year time frame. We're looking at a 40-year time frame. So really very important from a planning perspective to look at that, over the long term. And then just how that all boils down in the moment to moment as well from the operation standpoint. How do we dispatch power? How do we handle that in a new environment of very flexible, the need to be flexible with power, because you have variable generation on the one side, you have variable loads on the other side. Both sides are becoming more unpredictable, and then you have climate on top of that, and we have more variability in the climate. We need more data and more predictability, and how do we do that? That's another place where we're looking at solutions like AI to help bring some sanity to the situation. So all of these things, all of these technologies are being introduced in the next 5 to 10 years, and they will make a big difference in how we plan for the grid in the next 30 to 40 years.
I do want to talk about AI because I know that it's something that folks are interested in. So can we talk about, so we've talked AI as the problem. Yes, we're going to use a lot more energy potentially to power AI, but on the solution side, is there work that SCE and SoCalGas are doing around, how are we leveraging what we know about AI to do planning or whatnot?
Oh, absolutely. So I think AI and data center load in the near term, yes, it's like a happy problem, a kind of a good problem to have. It is a transformative technology that we want to make sure that we're supporting. And on the other side, how do we bring it in internally? And I think you said it perfectly, to help to optimize, where we put these data centers, how do we manage the energy flows within our grid? How do we think about different scenarios around for resource planning purposes and energy storage deployment purposes? And so that's just scratching the surface. I mean, there's a lot that we still need to understand about the capabilities of AI, but the opportunities we think are huge, and we're just kind of, again, piloting minor things. We have an NVIDIA pilot that we're looking at around grid management tools, but throughout our company, we're looking at ways to work more efficiently with AI and run the grid more effectively as well.
And Armando, are you in piloting new stage, or where have we got?
No, it's just to mention what it was mentioned related to AI in the energy industry. Right? We're in the early stages. I think across the industry is looking to which use cases AI can benefit for the operations of the utilities. Right, resource planning is one, but looking what are the other solutions. AI can also play on energy systems, right? A standalone system. How can to optimize the different uses and uses of that energy to really provide the best solution to customers.
Yes.
If I could build on just one thing there.
Please.
I mean, AI is a big buzzword right now, and people are talking about it as if it's new. But a lot of the stuff that we've been doing for quite some time, and it fits under that rubric, right? We've been using machine learning, for well over a decade. We've been gathering data. We have tons and tons of information and it's being applied in new ways all the time. But a lot of it is what one of our members recently called oh, that's old hat. That's stuff that we've done for a long time. But what we're looking at now, some of the new Gen AI approaches and some of the new ways in which we can use data in real time to optimize the grid in real time, and just from an operation standpoint, is some of the newer areas which are very close to implementation.
Awesome. Well, I swore I would leave time for questions, but you hold on one second. Before we go that, let's talk about resources. So what do we need to get from here to there? What do we need to get from, where we are right now? We have data centers coming online, not necessarily in Southern California for a variety of reasons, but we want them to be part of the clean energy transition.
Yep.
What's missing?
So I think we got to, just to set the context, in California, we have some pretty significant deep decarbonization targets. We have SB 100, we're reaching 100% clean by 2045. We have net zero targets. Some of our internal analysis, our Countdown 2045 paper and analysis that we've done at Edison has shown we need about 7,000 megawatts of new generation each year to hit 2045. And just from some context, we're about 2,000 megawatts on average new capacity for the last 20 years. So that's over 3x increase in annual capacity additions, sort of just to reach the decarbonization targets we have. Now, we've done a lot of work in the last 5 years. We added about 13,000 megawatts of energy storage in the last 5 years to support grid reliability and GHG emissions to better utilize the solar that we have in the system. Now, if we, in the near term, if we add in data centers on top, I think in the near term, we're generally okay with the capacity that we have in the system. The question is, do we run gas more, to sort of support that in the near term, which is possible. But where it comes down, in my mind, is more and more accurate planning and frequent planning around the load increases that might come from AI and any other electrification load, so that we can get those into our integrated resource plans and have stable procurement process to get to our 2045 target. Now, there's a lot of it's going to be difficult. It's not easy at all.
You heard it here first. It's going to be hard.
Very challenging, time, and that's not even getting into the types of resources we need. When we hit, post 2030, we're going to need other types of resources, what we call clean firm power. Data centers are a nice baseload kind of potential resource, but also that need 24-hour energy, and so that requires also needing 24-hour clean energy. So what does that mean? Is that small modular reactors? Is that more geothermal? And so transitioning our planning efforts to not only include that load, but figure out how we can start procuring these clean firm resources are going to be key if I have any chance of meeting these targets at all.
Before I head to the audience, anybody want to add in on this?
Well,
and then
yeah.
You're first.
Just from our perspective, I think one of the main focus is to continue providing safe, reliable, and affordable energy today, right? And leverage the existing infrastructure that we have in place in California. The gas system is ready to support the growth needed in a safe and reliable way, right? But we also need to be focused and be ready for tomorrow, right? And one way to do that is to look in solutions in the near term that can be supported either as a permanent solution or as a bridge to grid solutions, right? Until the grid is ready to support larger load, right? So I think it's a combination of different tools in the toolbox that we need to leverage.
Absolutely, many tools.
Yeah, if I could just add one thing, we're looking, I think we have a tendency to think about those kind of solutions as technical solutions, but it's really important to recognize in this space, especially, that technology can only move forward as fast as the business model and the regulatory model can keep up with it. And so all of these things really kind of move at the same pace. One of the purposes for conferences like this and information exchange like this is to make sure that all the stakeholders are aware of what's going on with this process. It's shocking to me sometimes how much of the information that we have flowing around in the space is outdated or misunderstood. And it's really important to recognize, yes, these are big concerns, and yes, we have solutions, but we really have to look at this together.
Absolutely. We're starting Q&A. I promised, and I keep my promises.
Thanks. Really fascinating. Mind-blowing discussion about using AI to kind of optimize the power supply. I appreciate it. Thank you to all of you. I guess the one thing that comes to mind to me is like, it's like half of the equation. When you think about moving power around and optimizing power, how about moving data around and optimizing data to conserve power or better optimize power? Does that come into the equation too? I mean, maybe that's a little bit out of our lane, but
Now,
how do you consider that?
I was going to say, at least from our perspective, data is, so I mean, it's a really interesting thing about data is that everybody knows how valuable data is, but on the one side, it's not shared. It's kept very proprietary typically, and so it's very hard for all of the right people to get a hold of the right kinds of data, right? And I mean, for good reasons, right? We don't want data to fall in the hands of the wrong people. We want to be careful about business critical data, and there are lots of reasons why data is kept confidential. But sometimes that means that we can't optimize. It's very difficult to optimize because we don't know what's going on the whole system. The other thing is that even the people who own the data don't necessarily have the time or the capacity to be able to process all of that data and to come up with solutions. So there's no question data continues to be and is if anything is ever more important in all of these things. We have to keep collecting it and we have to keep doing something with it. Right now it's a very interesting time because we're finally, I think, coming up with ways in which we can make this a lot easier to process and use this data. One of the big advantages of Gen AI, for example, is that you can actually clean up your data a lot more easily than we could 10 years ago. Some of the processes that we learned for big data have now become relatively easy to implement. So that's a big step forward. And hopefully, as we go further and we maybe find better ways, legal, business ways of sharing that data and allowing better access to that data, that we can continue to use that to optimize the grid as a whole.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And actually, I was thinking as well, maybe this is a question for Sara. I mean, what do the data center owners consider? Do they move data around to conserve power at their data centers based on constraints that they know on the power side?
As you just heard, there are times where there are, so the short answer is yes, but the longer answer is it really depends on who the customer is and what their needs are in terms of security and data. And there's such complicated data sharing agreements. I'll use an example that's not our own, like Digital Realty, who's one of our lessors, was able to share water data with Nalco for cooling towers and with Ecolab, which does the cooling tower chemicals, saving, 126 million gallons of water a year because they were able to share data between the three of them and can find leaks. AI is great at leaks. That's a lot of data sharing, actually, right? So, that's wonderful. Yay, points for that. But those are the opportunities we see, but we have to figure out how to do it very safely.
And I can only imagine how long it took the lawyers to figure all of that out. Yeah.
I will shout out to my good friend Aaron Binkley, who runs sustainability at Digital, who did figure it out. Oh, we have a question over here.
So I know microgrids are seen as a way of resiliency redundancy, right? So if the grid goes down and you have other components, but in data centers where seconds are millions of dollars, how do you design the microgrid for that? So do you oversize the batteries because in an event of the microgrid is, sorry, the utility is going to go down, do you oversize hydrogen supply or gas supply?
Yeah, Armando.
Sure, yeah. So yeah, so in order to design a microgrid, you start with what is the load curve that you want to serve, right? And how much reliability you want to put, what is the reserve margin that you want to put in, and that will vary from customer to customer and the use cases that you're trying to support, right? Some use cases will require bigger levels of reserve and reliability, right? So you need 2 units in order to support that, right? One to support and the other for backup, right? It really depends on the use case that you want to serve, but you work that with the customer and you design a system that satisfies the customer need. I don't know, my friends from EPRI.
Yeah, I mean it's exactly as Armando described. We've you can design the microgrid to serve whatever load you need. We've just worked, for example, on a military microgrid project where they needed a seamless transition. And so we have the batteries there, we have the solar arrays there, we have actually the solar arrays belong to SCE, and we have other equipment, very advanced electronic equipment that makes sure that there's basically a seamless transition and actually flows, you actually don't notice, there's no flicker when it transitions over to batteries or back to the grid as needed. And, depending on, again, the customer, there are some military customers who come to us and say, well, we kind of need the zombie apocalypse scenario, right? We need to be able to go off grid indefinitely if necessary. And 14 days at the very least, and then, longer than that if at all possible. And so we've actually designed microgrids for those kinds of scenarios. It's not cheap, but it is possible.
Yeah, data centers operate in the world of the nines, which I think we've heard of, like five. We must have 5 nines. So as long as you can stay within, that means you're online 99.99999% of the time, is what we promise our customers. You can't have a hospital going offline, right? Because oops, I put in a microgrid and I didn't make it big enough, right? So it's the 5 nines is how we think about everything, and then within the 5 nines parameters, we are super excited about all sorts of fun solutions. Yes.
All right, affordability. So,
Yep.
as you're looking at right now, over the next, like, say, 1 to 3 years, what is the most affordable power source? If you were to boost the amount of energy available, what's the cheapest, most affordable way to do that?
So I'm going to just cop out and say it always depends, right? It's always going to depend. But what I appreciate about our state is that we have a pretty robust integrated resource planning process that looks, next year to 10 years out plus to do exactly that, to say, okay, on aggregate and also in the local level, if we were to optimize, hey, we have, whatever it is, 40 gigawatts of gas still in the system. We have, we're at whatever, 50% clean right now. Incremental to that, what do we need? And so in the last couple of years, it's looked like solar and storage, solar and 4-hour batteries. And that's probably what it's going to look like for the next few years also. You're going to throw a little bit of wind in there, maybe offshore wind, right? I'm not sure it's the most affordable. I'll just put, but the load shape is nice. The generation shape is nice. And so all that to say is there's a mix of resources that are going to be needed to not only hit the GHG targets, but also to hit the aggregate sort of planning reserve margin that we're trying to solve for in California at least cost. And there are some off-the-shelf kind of generation and storage systems that can do that today that are fairly inexpensive. Now, the last few years, we came out of a global pandemic, supply chain issues and inflation that jacked up those prices fairly significantly. But as we start hopefully rolling off some of that, we come back to, between 4 and 8 hour storage, potentially a lot of solar and wind. But that's only going to get us so far, like I said. We're going to need clean firm. We're going to need new types of resources that California isn't procuring in bulk yet. And the question is going to be, how do we commercialize those in an environment where affordability is a primary concern?
Yeah, and it's at every level of a data center, right? So again, we're not tweeting about Sara, but the code can get more efficient. How that code is shared on servers and between data centers can get more efficient. The data center itself can get more efficient, and then the grid can get more efficient, right? And so depending on what load is going in what place, the answer will absolutely vary. Anybody else want to hop in on?
I was just going to say, it's always confusing when we give that kind of an answer, but solar is an extremely low cost of energy at noon. It's not an extremely low cost energy at midnight. So just have to. It does depend, right? It depends on what you're using it for and when you're using it. So what we're really looking for is a portfolio. We're looking for a portfolio that gives us a certain level of reliability, and when we're looking at reliability, not just over a daytime, but over a whole year or over actually a much longer period than that, 30-year period, whatever it happens to be. And that also depends on the configuration of your grid. It depends on where your power plants are located. It depends on where where we can import power from and where we can export power to. So there are so many different factors that go into that, and that's really why we're kind of looking at this from, as much as possible, a system optimization perspective rather than trying to find a one-size-fits-all answer like, we did in the past. And just to, not to go off to too long of a rant on this, but it used to be really easy, right? People would just say, oh, LCOE, levelized cost of energy. Let's just find the lowest cost, levelized cost of energy, and let's do this. And we've been saying for the last 10 years, EPRI has been on a mad chase. No, LCOE is no longer a very useful metric. When you look at LCOE for things like renewables or for storage, it doesn't apply. It doesn't apply at all. So let's take a look at how we can look at this from realistic metrics.
Thank you. Yes.
Just wondering, with data center loads, I find that they're super flat, and then renewables is super variable, in my experience, what I looked at. So why do we, I think as a society oftentimes we're thinking renewable might be the solution to data centers. Just curious why we're not exploring things like hydro, nuclear, is it mostly around environmental factors, or is it beyond that?
I mean, we'll look at anything, right? I mean, like we've got a data center in New Zealand that only runs on geothermal, and in Scandinavia, it's waste heat recovery. Right? I mean, there's like but it's again very, very location dependent. It's sunny here, so it in a way that it isn't elsewhere in the world. So yeah, when in terms of maybe it will be interesting to this question as like, how do we do this analysis of what, for example, how do we know if a green hydrogen microgrid is the right, if I came to you and I was like, I'd like to interconnect something in, somewhere in SoCalGas territory, there's not kind of enough grid power right now to ensure the reliability we want. How do you do that analysis?
Yeah.
Not that I'm saying that that's happening.
No, at the end of the day, you need to do an optimization analysis based on, like you mentioned, what resources are available, right? And it's very locational dependent, what policies are around the different resources, right? I think you need to be able to try to match your sources and uses. Base load, if you have intermittent source, how do you frame that either with other technologies, you pair with storage to frame that, or you complement with other solutions like fuel cell, linear generators, or any other base load technology that can provide that support, right? So you just run an optimization analysis, see what is the best in terms of different components like affordability, right? In terms of cost, in terms of the value reliability, or the opportunity cost around that to be able to find the most optimal solution.
And you have to think about the community. Certain solutions are loud, certain solutions have air quality issues associated with them. So it also depends on where you are, in terms of what makes you, environmental justice is very meaningful to all of us. And you can't, it's not, you don't just get to look at the grid in isolation of the people who live in your community. Yes. Sorry, anybody, I know, I will happily go to you if there's, okay, cool, yes.
So with the increased demand for all of these applications and the goals for zero emissions or carbon neutral, like what role do you see natural gas playing for both generation of electricity and obviously just gas on itself, specifically for California? Can we have a future that's 100% renewable without natural gas?
So I can start. I think we have a lot of work we've done on this. You can look on our website on Edison International. So my team actually ran a lot of kind of scenarios for 2045, and we're going to need gas. Like, there's no getting away from the capacity that gas provides the system all the way through 2045 and potentially beyond. Now the question is, the issue is you're going to have, from our perspective, a lot less energy that comes out of those plants, but they're going to need to be there when you need them. So let's think about the atmospheric rivers we had a couple years ago in the middle of the winter. Not a lot of solar, but you need gas or some sort of clean, firm power to sort of ride you through those reliability times. So there is, an opportunity to ensure that we're building enough and sufficient zero emissions resources, and we're going to keep moving. This is California. We're not building more gas units. But the gas that's here, in order to support reliability, in order to support, I think Armando said, customer affordability, are going to need to stay in the system to provide not only energy during reliability events, but also, you need inertia in the system to keep the grid operating properly, right? And so I'll couple that, though, with a lot of those plants in the future can start running on lower emissions fuels like hydrogen, like RNG. And so, and I know SoCalGas is looking at a lot of those solutions also, but I don't think, from an affordability and reliability perspective, we're going to see an exit in mass of gas in California.
Yeah, from our perspective, we believe that gas will complement the electric in order to achieve the state's goals, right? So the customers require reliable, and in order to achieve that, when you look to the portfolio of renewable energy that the state is looking, you need to have also dispatchable, right, to be able to provide reliable energy. Gas system will be here to support. I think one of the important aspects, as it was mentioned, affordability of that transition, right? And also how do we look into different cleaner ways to use a fuel like hydrogen, right? So clean fuels will play a long-term role, but it will be an evolution that we go transitioning from natural gas. Today we have renewable natural gas in the state of California that has a specific objective and uses in California today, but it can be expanded. And then how do we transition to hydrogen in the future?
Awesome. You can ask him that later. Okay. So since we only have 5 minutes left, which is why, but he'll be here, I promise. I'm going to steal the last question for myself, which is last takeaway, lightning round. We have like 4.5 minutes left. What is the one takeaway you would like our audience to have around data centers and the energy transition?
So I think there's, we talked a lot about planning and all of that, and how to ready the grid. The other takeaway I'd say is that there are policy changes that need to happen in order to support energy transition that we really haven't talked about. We need to work, and we've had a lot of good collaboration with policymakers, our Public Utility Commission and others, around how do we implement a framework around proactive planning. Obviously, we need to balance not overbuilding the grid for affordability sake, but also to make sure it's ready for these large loads. So there's a ton of regulatory change that need to happen to implement something like that. I'd also say on the let's build more infrastructure side, there are significant sort of opportunities to improve permitting, to improve our interconnection queue within the California ISO, and to enable kind of a long-term trajectory of both procuring clean energy and installing transmission systems, installing the transmission grid, and that's going to take some pretty big policy changes to enable that.
Awesome. Armando,
Yeah, from our perspective, I think in order to support these recent new demand, the gas infrastructure system is ready to do that in the near term, right? We just need to find the right combination in order to, in terms of timing, it will be important to keep those critical sectors in California and continue supporting the economic development in an affordable, reliable, and safe way. So I think leveraging everything that is in place is very important to get us to the end point.
Awesome. Haresh, you want to take us home?
Sure. So, I think that I'm totally agreement with Dan and Armando here. A lot of people are talking about this time as a great challenge, but it is also a great opportunity. And it's a great opportunity to look at this from a perspective not only of modernizing the grid, but also decarbonizing the grid. Having more load is not necessarily a bad thing. In addition to what we're doing to electrify, a lot of that electrification is coming by basically taking us away from fossil fuels. But in addition to that, all this additional load is a way by which we will be able to pay for the infrastructure, for the future. So it's a great opportunity. Let's again remember that none of this stuff will move forward with technology by itself. The policy has to keep up with that, and the the economics, the business case has to keep up with that. So all of those things are going to move together, or they're not going to move at all.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a great note to end on. If I could get a round of applause from my panelists. Thank you so much. Thank you for respecting keeping me offline. And I hope you, sorry guys, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of Verdexchange. And my panelists will stay to answer a couple questions in between your next session. So thank you so much.